Alright, so we have our app. Doesn't do much, but it does something. And now, let's see, the next piece I'd like to clean up is, well, currently we've just hard-coded the list of people right here. And I'd like to call out to a service to return that list of people for us. Eventually that service will be doing other things. We'll be doing things like saying, hey, get this group of people or that group of people. So it'll be returning different groups of people. So let's create some kind of a people service. And so the first thing we want to do is add a service. So let's let Ionic generate some code for us. I'm going to go to our terminal window. I'm going to start a new window. I'm going to head back into our project directory. So that's apps and Nameshaker, right? And we're going to use the Ionic command, and we're going to generate. So Ionic G for generate, and to find out what we can generate, I'll just say -- help, and it'll tell us the list of kind of things that Ionic can generate for us. And we can see it can generate components, directives, pages, pipes, providers, tabs. Yeah. We don't see the word service here, and that's because actually provider is the most generic kind of service. You know, a provider is a service, it's a factory, it's a lot of things. So yeah, what we want to generate is a provider. So let's go Ionic, G for generate, then we'll say provider, and the name of what we want to provide is people. So we're going to create a people provider. Hit return, and it generates the source for us. So once this is generated, we can see our changes pop up. It created a people. It created, in fact, created a file called people.ts, and it put it in a providers people directory. Sorry, providers people directory, and yeah, so created this people provider for us. So that's nice. And it also went into our app.module and it automatically added the plumbing. So people provider is now a provider. So we can inject this anywhere we want to use it. So let's do that. Let's go to our home.ts, and we're going to use our people provider. So let's go and say, I'm going to call it people service, because that's the kind of thing that it is for me, SVC. And a people service is an instance of people provider. Now, cool thing happened. I don't know if you noticed this. I typed in people provider, and it automatically imported it for me over here. The magic that did that is actually a plugin that I'm using, an extension I should say, in Visual Studio Code called Auto Import. I think that's the one that's doing it. So yeah, you'll see that I'm able to sometimes just type in the name of a class and it'll add the import statement for me. If you're using a different editor, and if you're not using this extension, then you'll have to type it in by hand or do whatever is appropriate for you. But for me, it actually added it right away. So we've now got our people provider, and let's move the people, so to speak. So I'm just going to grab these 4 people. As a matter of fact, I'm going to grab the entire array. I'm just going to chop it out, right? So we still have a member called people, but we haven't assigned anything to it yet. So let's go over to the people provider, which is, if I go here, I can just jump directly to it. There we go. We're going to add a method called get people. Right, what's get people going to do? Well, initially it's just going to return that array of people that we defined before. So I'll just return this array and maybe do a little indenting so it looks a little nicer. Right, so we now have our people provider has now got a property called get people, and it's going to return the list of people for us. So let's go back to our home page. Now in our constructor we can use this people service. We can call get people, right? And the array that it returns, we can just assign it to this dot people. Equals that. Okay. So now we can see an error. It's saying no provider for, well, it's regenerating the page and the error is going to come back. It's complaining about our people provider. If we go over to people, we can see no provider for HTTP. What's that all about? Well, we haven't actually added the module for HTTP support to our application yet, and we injected it in here. The people provider that got generated for us actually injects HTTP because it's a rather common assumption that your people provider or your provider is going to actually have to do some HTTP work. And we're not doing that yet. So simplest way to fix that is just let's get rid of it. We don't need HTTP injected, and we don't need it imported either. Do a quick save, and if we're lucky, everything works, and we'll see our list of people. And I'm pretty sure that's going to work. So I'm going to get ready. And I'm going to say let's commit this change so far. So this is create initial people service. Actually, that's the name of the variable I created. It's actually the people provider. There we go. So everything worked, and we're getting our stuff. So let's save that. Pretty good so far. All right, for this next section, I'd like to start taking advantage of a feature in TypeScript where we can apply types to various things. And this may seem unimportant, but I like it, especially once we start doing more advanced stuff. So let's just get right down to it. So at the moment, we have this function called getPeople, and it returns something. And we're going to be more specific about what it returns. We want to return an array of people. So we're going to define what people is. I understand we're in the people provider, and now we're going to define that we have a type. So we're going to say interface person. There we go. Yes, we want to define what a person is. And a person is something that has a name, and it's a string, and we're also going to say that it has an email address, and that's optional. So say question mark colon, and that's a string, right? So we've now declared something called person, and then down here we can say, hey, we're actually returning a person array. Okay? So we've now been very explicit about what we returned, and if any of these things didn't have a name, it would complain. Next thing we need to do is I want to export this so it could be used in other places. So I'm going to export that person, and then now we can go over to our home page, and we can say, hey, people, you know what? They're actually, we know what kind that is. They have to be a person array. So, if everything compiles, and it does, let's just wait for it. Yeah, everything's still working. Oh, wait a second. Doesn't like this, could not find name person. And that would be because we did not import it. Right, so that looks like it worked pretty good. We've just done a little refactoring here. We're now using types, and that'll make it easier to do the next section. So see you in the next section. And now we're back in the next section. So continuing on, first of all, let's commit what we've done so far. So I'm going to say, let's see, this is use types to represent people. That'll work. So the next thing, and this is kind of an important change that I think we want to do, is fixing up what people provider does. So at the moment you call get people and it returns you an array of people right away. We all know that actually this is an operation that could take a while. You know, if get people actually has to fetch the data from some external source, we really need this to be more asynchronous. The obvious ways to, you know, what we should return is probably we could return either a promise or an observable, and observable is a pattern that makes a lot of sense here. So let's do that. So instead of returning a person, we can now say we return observable. Okay, then a little less than sign, and then I go over here and add a greater than sign. Right, so we've now declared that we're returning an observable person array. Now we'll obviously need to import observable. Ooh, that was easy. So just by hitting completion there, it just brought in the whole thing for me. That's great. Observable, RSJX observable. Now next thing, I'm expecting if I save this, we're going to see an error over here saying that, well, hey, you said you were returning observable, but you're actually returning an array. So let's just change this code here. Let's say let people equals and return. Now if we say people, that's not the right thing. We want to return an observable of person array. So let's say there's a helper function called of that we can use. So I'm going to say observable dot of, and this helper function basically, you know, if you've got your array ready to return but you have to return an observable, this just wraps your array in observable and lets you return it right away. So we're just going to do that. Now lastly, we need to import this operator, and it may seem odd that we've imported observable and we don't get the of operator, and that's because with RSJX they've broken it up into these tiny pieces. It's a huge library, but you're only going to use a very small portion of it. So the way they've broken it up and made it modular, you literally have to say I want this piece, that piece, the other piece. So we'll just add that import over here. And if you're getting an error and you're missing a piece, just do a Google on it and pretty quickly you'll get the hang of it. So in this case we wanted to add observable, and we want the of operator. So there we go. So I think that should probably fix up all of the compiling issues here. We've now got this class called, well, sorry, we've got this method called getPeople, and it's returning an observable person array. And we use the of operator to convert our person array to an observable of person array. And now the next thing we need to do is go into, you know, the class that uses this, and that's our home class. And if we look over here, yeah, no surprise, it caught that we're doing something wrong. It's saying, hey, you're trying to assign this observable blah 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 to a person array. And that's one of the nice reasons that, you know, that's one of the nice things about using these types, is it lets the compiler catch things so much more easily for us. So let's fix this problem. And the first thing we want to do is we don't want to actually be doing any complicated logic inside a constructor. There's lots of good reasons for that. We actually want to do our initialization logic after the view got created. That's probably the best place for it. So we're going to take advantage of a lifecycle hook called view did load. Oh yeah, it's called Ion view did load. And you could probably guess what this function does. Basically, this lifecycle function gets called after the view loads. Not too hard. And I'm just going to comment this out for the moment. So what do we want to do? Well, we want to call people service and call that get people, and we want to subscribe to it. So I'll just copy that here and subscribe. And I'm noticing something. I'm not getting the completion. I think, it's because, yes, I see people service. Well, let me make the mistake. Here we go. Get people subscribe. So we want to call subscribe. And what do we want to do? When that list of people, I'll call it the people list, when that comes in, I want to say this dot people equals people list. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. So I missed something here, and I'm curious if the compiler, well, I know the compiler is going to catch it. And what it is this method doesn't actually, there we go. This method here, we don't actually have people service as a member of this class. People service is just a variable that has been injected into our constructor. So in order to make it a member of this class, there's a couple of different ways to do it. One is we could just type in people service here and then copy it in our constructor. But a better way to do it is just add the word private here. So when you say private, TypeScript is smart enough to say, oh hey, you've got a private variable being passed in. What does that mean? It means that this is a private member of this class. So when homepage gets created, it'll create a people service member that we can use later. So now we can go down here and we say this dot people service, and I hope that made sense. Made sense to me. It's a little hard to explain, but let's see if our compiler says, did we do everything right? And I think we have. So to summarize, while we're waiting for the compiler, it's yes, our people service gets passed in here, and come on, says it's not defined. I think it's just being a little slow. Let's make sure we save this. I may not have saved it. Sorry about that, folks. So, yes. People service gets injected. Because we said it's private, it's actually a member variable of this class. That means in Ion view did load, we're able to get access to that member called people service. We're able to call its get people function, and that's returning a observable of people array, person array. So we're able to subscribe to that, and when that data comes in, we execute this method here. We get that people list and we assign it. So that's looking pretty good to me. If everything works, then it'll look just like the way it did before. The application starts up. Hey, there we go. The application starts up, and after the view initializes, this call is made, and eventually we get our data like this. Whoops, didn't mean to change that. So that looks pretty good, and it moves us forward for sure. I'm going to save this change, and this is use observable. To get people. Well, it may not be the best commit comment in the world, but it'll work for me. And once again, all of these changes are, actually I don't think I mentioned this, these changes will be saved in GitHub, and you'll be able to load this project and follow along at any time. Thank you.